Alright, some of you might have seen my update earlier about how my content's going to be different from here on out, so here we are. I'm going to try sharing my writing for now, starting things off with an original character of mine named Sovereign, a prevailing figure in the tyrannical government whose extreme sense of guilt drives him to commit terrible moral failings for a perceived concept of redemption. It feels weird doing this. I'm not sure how some might think of me after watching. I can't really find any other videos doing what I'm doing, but hey. If there's anything I've learned in life, nothing worth doing is gonna be comfortable. Some of you probably don't know the series he takes place in, so I'll just give some brief context. In 2018 to 19, I made a pilot trilogy series called World Beta. He was actually thought of in the middle of working on that trilogy, and I kind of wished he was in the episode I was animating at the time since I was really lost back then. Let's just say I've learned lessons from that project. The premise is set in a technologically advanced world. The most revered achievement from that world is making a passageway to the tidal realm, World Beta. Following a disaster that occurs there known as the Amberlink Nightmare, the government forms a group known as Alvarak Zealots, which takes over the realm and confiscates everyone's outlet to secure control of World Beta. The protagonist, Mark, is a quiet and cynical young man who's been ostracized for most of his life. In a moment of desperation, he steals an outlet and is brought to World Beta, where he finds a resistance group known as Amberlink Resistance. There's a big conflict on how the realm should be handled following the disaster, and that sparks an ongoing war between multiple parties. While Mark is mainly interested in some of the aesthetics and people he finds there, he performs an insanely difficult magical phenomenon called the Ultimate Redemption, making him a central figure in the conflict. From then on, he would play a key role in this war, undergoing intense experiences he wouldn't have had the chance to get before. Pretty much challenging the resentment he has for society along with his desire to avenge his father, and proves himself to everyone who rejected him. Now this is supposed to be like my magnum opus. I made this series specifically because I saw something in Sword Art Online, and wanted to make the kind of thing I was expecting from it. The expected result was the perfect show that, for pretty much every minute of its duration, is good enough to elicit a state of deep emotional investment and intense source of escapism. I vaguely refer to this idea as the beauty region. Look, I was in 8th grade, I know how this might sound, and I definitely look back at some of my earlier reactions and cringe a bit, but with what I've gotten so far, I think it's been worth it, and I'd rather just let the results speak for themselves. The general formula would include long runtime, stable pacing, exceptional writing, and grandiose production value. So I came up with this plot as something I thought would benefit the ideal I had in mind. He was thought of in spring 2019 and the main parts were formed in fall 2020, so I figured it's been more than long enough to just share what I've been thinking. So Sovereign is introduced as an anonymous third party. He wears a mask to conceal his face, and Sovereign is just an alias for his real name. For now. So he works alongside his lifelong friend Violet Slick in search of Albany, one of the Resistance members who has been used by her father to start the Amberlink Nightmare, the crisis that destabilized World Beta in the first place. Violet is a very confident, feminine, and most importantly, caring person. As a general rule, she sees the best in everyone and even tries her hardest not to garner any hatred for her enemies. She has made every effort to be there and give support to Sovereign throughout his commitment, but driven as he is, he hasn't shown any love to her since the nightmare. Now, Albany has known all the other Resistance members besides Mark nearly her whole life, as they were raised together by the Zealots following the nightmare. But before, she had a brother named Maverick, to whom she would occasionally look back to and use as motivation. Of course, this would be essentially the only thing the Resistance does not understand Albany that much on. Sovereign would have a more rocky relationship with both sides, and his interactions with either of the two would be rather limited. He'd sometimes call temporary truces with the Resistance when needed, and mainly as an excuse to get closer to Albany since he wants to know the full truth of what happened. In the Season 1 finale, the Resistance is attempting a dangerous act needed to access a region. This is something that both sides can use to their advantage, so remember this. And Violet tragically dies as a side effect. She has a moment of pessimism, especially about Sovereign with the way he's been so distant to her, but she then figures it was because he was just so focused on everything else that she still holds fondness for him. Upon learning of her demise, Sovereign figures this as a sign of urgency and joins the Zealots so he can more quickly reach Albany. He grows more aggressive toward the Resistance, and whatever ambiguity in his allegiance there is quickly gone. As Season 2 goes on, he grows more dedicated in his goals, pushing his men to strive harder and reserving more time and energy toward his pursuit. There was another third-party girl named Tamara, who I'll get to in another video, with a more contrasting, cheeky, and energetic personality. She joins the Zealots later, and just like how he was when joining, he's less concerned with previous rivalries and works with her too. Now comes Season 3. The Resistance is growing more powerful and Sovereign's resolve is growing more threatened. He strongly believes against the ambitions of the Resistance, and his temperament gradually becomes more and more aggressive. At one point, while a large amount of indigenous creatures of the realm are threatened, there's a region in their path which is believed to keep people trapped forever in the case you're not careful. Sovereign impulsively runs through this region, putting not just his life but also his eternity at stake, frantically ensuring their safety. He's fortunate enough to get a comrade named Jocelyn, who, as well as she tries, brings out the best in him. He won't express any feelings or anything, but he'd be sure to keep her informed and safe. There's a certain moment where Sovereign is risking his life trying to access another region, and Jocelyn confronts him, angrily asking what he's doing. He simply tells her he's fulfilling his obligation, and she continues to desperately persuade him otherwise. The scene ends when she says something along the lines of, "Think of the people who care about you," and this gets to him, pushing him to dive in and go. He actually manages to meet up with the Resistance before both he and Albany get caught up in something and are transported to another region. Despite all their conflict, she brings herself to cooperate with him, trying to get their way around. There's even a moment she has an opportunity to take off his mask, but she ultimately can't do it. Later on, Albany is rescued, and Sovereign finds his way out too. In the Season 3 finale, the Resistance is pursuing the one responsible for Albany's temporary capture, where they meet Sovereign. Albany is more angry this time around, desperately wanting to know why he's been doing what he's been doing, to which she figures to respond by taking off his mask, revealing himself to be Albany's brother Maverick. She breaks down, collapsing, and he explains to them his reasons for fighting before ultimately getting away. Come Season 4, the Resistance is pursuing a strategy called the Amberlink Campaign, where they would try to stabilize each region one by one. The Zealots reveal to have kept a hostage from the Resistance since the Season 2 finale, and by this time Maverick needs potential information from her now more than ever. He would interrogate her aggressively, but with her time in the group and having gotten to know him through previous fights, she doesn't yield. The Resistance then pursues another mission, which I might get to later, and he assesses that at the rate they're going, many people are going to be killed. He starts interrogating her even more aggressively, really violating his own morals, but she still refuses to give any more information. The Resistance pursues further, and at this point Maverick is panicking, yelling at the top of his lungs in desperation for her to give more information, and she still refuses. So in a moment of desperation, he realizes the power dynamic here. He's really hesitant to break another value, so he gives her another chance, to which she refuses again, and, well, I think you can figure out what he does. Even after all that, she refuses to tell anything, so he essentially gives up, figuring it's too late to stop them and he doesn't want to stoop to any more lows. In the Season 4 finale, Albany tags her comrade Noah along as she sees Maverick roaming World Beta alone to where she meets up with him. She's had a while to think about it, so as Maverick is aggressive and stubborn as usual, she prods him on why he's doing what he is. He shrugs her off, of course, but then gets more and more agitated until she brings up Violet. This touches a nerve in him, and he denies it, saying that he's been driven by a greater sense of urgency. She would tap into it some more until he lashes out. He then talks with Albany about what's been going on in the past, how he has been striving intensely to find her ever since the nightmare. Reluctantly, he would also include details about Violet and how their relationship has changed. We then see a flashback to the last time Maverick sent her on a mission, and she's about to confess something personal to him. Before she can elaborate, communications are muted, and she's then deployed. He then admits to Albany that she has always been there for her, and he never showed her any appreciation during that time. He also speculates some on why he's been acting like he has, and as they both talk, Tamara overhears their conversation. As they continue, she'd make sure her team waits before acting, as she looks back to footage of that trick the Resistance attempted by the end of Season 1, and she gets an idea, seeing Violet's dying words. Shortly after, the Zealots invade the region, and Maverick doesn't comply. Tamara comes up and instead brings him in patiently. He assures her that they shouldn't be invading, but then she brings him declassified information he wanted to examine. She then shows him evidence of what happened back then, but only the parts Violet says out of context that makes it look like she was cursing him, and that it was the Resistance's, particularly Albany's, fault. In a moment of urgency, he relapses to the state he was in the Season 1 finale and captures Albany. On to Season 5, he and Tamara have been promoted in recognition for this. Despite having strived so long for Albany's sake, Maverick would interact with her as a captive he's taken. He's conflicted with what he's done, despite being more set on working for Violet's sake. This uncertainty climaxes when he realizes the full scope of what the Zealots are doing, and as he confronts Tamara about it, they part ways. He leaves with his most loyal comrades to once again fight on the sidelines. By the advent of the series finale, he has essentially embraced that he has been doing this for redemption with Violet and to create a world she would have wanted. His tactics are more aggressive than ever, but also better composed since he has a better vision of what's going on. After the climax, when World Beta is finally being stabilized, Maverick is being targeted, and Jocelyn jumps in to save him. She tells him to avoid making the same mistakes and live on. She also assures that she is grateful for his resolve and also lies, saying she saw Violet assure the same. Before he can comment, she's already gone where she's gunned down. So this arc has taken some inspiration from Zuko of Avatar, bits and pieces of personal experience, and also just genuine originality. I've been trying to make some psychoanalysis evaluation. It's not toxic masculinity, though there are some elements you can draw from, like putting others before himself to an extreme degree and also being incredibly out of touch with his own values. Most of this development sort of came as a result of that betrayal in the season 4 finale I thought up in late 2020. It was sort of meant as a betrayal of how deeply intertwined certain mindsets can be, and despite all the progress that can be done to challenge it, it can still be reverted when taking the original catalyst and experiencing it in a similar way. The ambition I have with him is as someone whose entire motivation is guilt. Guilt to me is one of the most interesting emotions out there, and I wanted to test the limits of how extreme it can affect someone without strong emotional stability. I hope you were intrigued as much as I was. I'm not even exaggerating when I came up with this. I actually shed one single tear, and that says a lot because you'd be amazed at how casual I can be in a moment's notice. So that concludes Sovereign. Let me know of any thoughts you have. For the next character showcase, I plan to delve into Tamara. Take care.